Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. I want to talk to you today about optimism after a few seconds of Mongoloid by Devo. So before I begin, I want to tell you that the tour I had planned to go on in Europe next month will be happening, but I just won't be there. My friend Shozan Jack Haubner is taking over two of the retreats, and the other one is being led by Marco in Finland, and I'm putting the dates up on screen for you right now. September 11th through 14th in Finland, September 17th through 21st, Benediktushof in Germany, September 27th through 30th, Hebden Bridge, England. So if you've signed up for those retreats, please don't unsign up, because I think Shozan Jack Haubner is a great guy. He has a YouTube channel called Zen Confidential. He has a couple of books. Zen Confidential is one of the books, and the other one is Single White Monk. They are both terrific. So go read them and go watch the Zen Confidential website YouTube channel if you want to know what his style is like. I think he's about the closest you can get to having me there. So please don't unsign up for those retreats, and do sign up if you haven't already. All right, so last night I watched the Devo documentary, which just came out on Netflix. I don't know if it was released somewhere else before it came out on Netflix. I had been hearing about this documentary for years. I don't even remember. It seems like a decade or something. It just, I would hear that they were working on this documentary. They contacted some friends of mine, including Jimmy Image, the lead singer of Zero Defects, the band I'm in, for material, because he had some early Devo material that they didn't have, because Jimmy was around the Devo people back when they first started. So yeah, a lot of people I knew were sort of involved. My friend, I don't know if he was involved in the movie, but a friend of mine, David Giffels, wrote this book, We Are Devo, with Jade Dellinger. I'm not sure, maybe I know Jade too, I'm not sure, but I definitely know Dave Giffels. He was my next door neighbor for a while, and he was in a band called The Difficult. And so he wrote that book on Devo. So I got a lot of Devo connections. A friend of mine is married to Mark Mothersbaugh's sister. So, Mark Mothersbaugh being the lead singer of Devo. So I got a lot of Devo connections. I interviewed Mark Mothersbaugh for when I was writing for Suicide Girls. And he told me a story that I think he told me the story. I think I might have been the first one he told the story to, or maybe the first one he told the story to in a long time, because I hadn't heard this story. He told a story to me when I did that interview of Devo was playing somewhere in New York City, and he was in the van, Mark Mothersbaugh, after the concert, and John Lennon, who lived in New York at the time, leaned into the van, drunk with all this booze on his breath, and went, yeah, which is part of a Devo song. What is the song? Oh gosh, I've forgotten which one. But Mark Mothersbaugh said it was interesting to him because, number one, meeting John Lennon in a weird way, and number two, that the song was actually, Mark Mothersbaugh had written the song as a kind of a parody of the Beatles' She Loves You, so yeah. A lot more yas in their version. So watching this documentary, I was reminded of how pessimistic Devo can be, which is something I kind of noticed about them, maybe not when I first started liking them. See, I first started liking Devo like way back because they were from Akron, and I was living in Wadsworth, Ohio at the time. You can look it up on Google Maps or something. It's a sort of a suburb of Akron, and then I moved to Akron later. But I always tell people I'm from Akron because nobody would know where Wadsworth was. Anyway, or is. It still is there. Anyway, living in Wadsworth and being underage, I didn't get to see Devo's early club days. But I saw them in the newspaper a lot. The Akron Beacon Journal was covering the rise of Devo for a while. And I knew what they looked like, but I had no idea what they sounded like. Until one day I happened to wander into Camelot Music in Summit Mall, and they were playing one of the Devo videos there on a TV. So I guess I saw that. and just became hooked on Devo, and I was really into them. And in fact, the first band I was in high school, we played Mongoloid, which is a Devo song. We may have played some other Devo songs, I don't remember, but that was off their first album. So yeah, I got a good pedigree with Devo. But as I said, did I say this? Anyway, as I meant to say, I was reminded watching this movie of how pessimistic the Devo outlook is. And I don't know if I picked up on that early on. I might have, because I was sort of a pessimistic person in general, especially in my teenage years. I guess a lot of people are. But I was sort of dour and serious and mad at everything. And Devo's music was helpful to me in those days because it was something I could relate to. Unlike the sort of REO Speedwagon or Boston or Styx or Foreigner or whatever else people were listening to in those days, my high school peers, that was much more optimistic, and happy. And Devo was happy in their own way, because you could tell they were happy playing the music, but they tended to get kind of pessimistic. So let's fast forward a few years, and I'm in Japan, and this is the early 90s, I guess, or mid 90s, I suppose. And I started studying Zen with Gudo Wafu Nishijima Roshi, my teacher, the guy who ordained me and gave me my ticket to fame by making me a Dharma heir in his lineage. And one of the things that he would say a lot in those days, I guess he said it probably all the time, was, "I'm very optimistic." And I remember being really, that was rubbing me the wrong way, like, ugh, optimistic, ugh. I didn't like this optimistic stuff. I thought optimists were stupid, like anybody who saw the good in the world or thought the future might be better than the past or the present. I thought they were a bunch of dum-dums, and I really rejected that. But there were other things about Nishijima Roshi that I liked a lot, so I continued to study and practice with him, and I really appreciated my time with him. And eventually some of that optimism, what's the word? Rubbed off on me? Is that the phrase we use in English? I don't know. Some of that optimism just kind of infected me, I suppose. And I became more optimistic myself. And when I became more optimistic, life got better. Optimism is a funny thing because, okay, as I've mentioned a few times on this channel already, I'm undergoing some medical treatments for a serious medical condition. Most of you have guessed what it is. I don't like to say it out loud. This is one of, maybe it's a little bit of a superstition or something. But I'm not trying to keep a secret from anybody. Look in the comments section. Well, don't comment about it. But anyway, a lot of people, just judging from the responses I got, figured out what is my problem. And it's a serious condition. And it's the kind of thing that one might be inclined to take a very pessimistic view of. Now, what's interesting is my doctors. I've had 3 doctors kind of look at me about this stuff, or 4, I suppose, and they've all been very optimistic. They've all been kind of like, yeah, there's going to be some difficulty. The treatment is not easy, but it's doable. And you'll be all right. They're telling me. One guy actually came really out specifically and said that with a smile, that I would be okay. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Now, of course, they could be wrong. I could think of a million reasons that they could be wrong. But I also know that they've dealt with this stuff way more than I have, and they've probably seen a lot more people, a lot more patients than I've I haven't seen anybody. And they know what they're saying, and they're not going to put their reputations on the line saying this kind of thing without reason. So I'm like, okay, that's great. And that makes me feel good, and that makes me more energized to do what I need to do my part for this. And just in general, I think optimism is a better way to live. The thing about pessimism is often thought of by the people who are pessimists, and I'm pointing at myself here when I say this, as being a realistic outlook. Like, look at the world, look at the things that are going on and the things that have happened to other people and whatever, blah, blah, and things that happen. You gotta be pessimistic. Everything's blah. And this is the kind of attitude that comes across among the members of Devo when they're getting interviewed for this documentary. And I don't want to sound like I'm putting down the documentary. It's not. I was so afraid when I switched it on last night that it was going to be just a bummer, because I knew how pessimistic they could be. But it's not. It's really not. The bummer parts of it are here and there, but overall the most of the movie is pretty, is interesting and positive. But the pessimists will think that their outlook is realistic. But I don't think it's realistic. And in terms of Zen, there's a kind of a sense a lot of people have, and this comes across in some of the early Buddhist and maybe even some of the Hindu literature, where if you have a good feeling about yourself, that's not good. You should have a bad feeling about yourself. There's a lot of stuff in early Buddhism about contemplating the impurity of the body, or contemplating all the bad things you've done in life and all of the things. And I don't know where that comes from. I'm a little bit reluctant to disparage early Buddhism, but I don't like that stuff. And I don't think, for people who are sort of a pessimistic bent already, is that really a phrase? It's not good. It doesn't help anything. It just makes you feel sad. But the thing is, I think a lot of that is put out to counter people who might be sort of full of themselves and sort of way too, maybe there were a lot of people like this in India in Buddha's day, I don't know, who are like, I'm the best and everything's going great and I'm going to win and I'm a winner and blah, 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 and maybe to kind of put a little damper on people like that, they tell you to contemplate your impurities and your bad things you've done and so forth. But the thing about the ego, which Shozan Jack Haubner just put up a new video on his Patreon channel, which I guess will come out on YouTube for everybody next week. I think that's how he does it. He talks about the ego in an interesting way. But one of the things about the ego, or this sense of individual self, is that it can be enhanced as much, sometimes more, by negative self-talk as much as it can by positive self-talk. So people kind of will fixate on the idea of positive self-talk as being enhancing the ego, because that seems obvious. Because if I do positive self-talk, I'm the best and I'm going to be all right and I'm going to be good and whatever. That sounds like it's inflating the ego. But the opposite side of I'm the worst, or this is going to be terrible, or life is going to be bad, and blah, 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 that is also a way to enhance the personal ego. And the other thing about optimism is, when we come to talking about the future, when we kind of anticipate the future, I did a video a few weeks ago where I was talking about Nisargadatta Maharaj's advice of don't anticipate and don't regret. I still think that's good advice. Because when you're anticipating the future, you can put anything in there. And it doesn't matter. You're just using your imagination. You're remembering things from the past and projecting them into the future and sort of imagining how the future you will be. But there's no future you. I mean, there is a future you in some sense. We can talk about that. I don't know if I want to talk about that. Dogen gets really weird when he talks about the past and the future. But right now is what's going on right now. And right now, in this moment, when I think about it, things are pretty good, for me. And when I was going through I had these treatments I'm getting are once every 2 weeks. So basically I get a week on where things are a little iffy. And then I get a week off like this week where I feel almost completely normal. So I guess that's the way it's going to go. When it got its worst last week, which actually wasn't nearly as bad as I feared, but it got kind of bad. I had this horrible stomach aches and cramps for an entire day. But I think about it, it wasn't, when I say horrible stomach aches, it was a bad stomach ache, but it wasn't so bad that I was doubled over in pain all day. I did go out, went shopping with my wife and looked for pillows or something. I forget what we were looking for, but I did finally have to beg off, and I'm like, my stomach hurts too bad. I gotta go home. But I could have stayed out. I just wasn't comfortable. So even in the worst of it, there was a lot to be happy about. There was a lot of things going on that were great. I had a nice bed to lay in. I had my wife there to help me and to look up things, because we're new to this stuff, and so we didn't know, like, is this a problem? Should we go to the ER or whatever? Turns out, no, it's perfectly normal. People who go through these treatments have stomach aches, and I expect to get one next week. So but it'll be fine. Even in the worst moments I've had, there's always been something you could pull out that was good about them, and I think that's kind of the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. The pessimist looks at the situation and picks out the bad parts and emphasizes those in his or her mind, and then ruminates about all the bad parts. I know this for a fact because this is what I used to do. But you can also do the opposite, and you can say, okay, well, here's the situation. What's good about it? And there may be some situation that you encounter that has no good about it, but these things are things you imagine. These are the products of the imagination. This is always where people go with these arguments. They'll be like, "What about?" And then they'll mention the worst thing that ever happened in human history, and say, "What about them?" But you're not them. You're not in that. That's something you're imagining, and we don't know that part. We only know our own lives. So we look at our own lives and choose to stay positive. Now, I don't know. I got some people in my circle who are into the whole, what's the thing called? Oh, Jesus, what's it called? It's that thing where you try to attract, the law of attraction, that's what it is, where you try to attract good things to you by keeping good thoughts in your mind and keeping a positive attitude. I don't know how much that works in a sort of mystical sense. I think your karma is kind of inevitable. So you can't really change your karma, your personal trajectory in life by doing that. But you can change how your personal trajectory in life affects you emotionally by just staying positive. And there is that all thoughts are just thoughts. This is where I want to go with that. So a positive thought or a negative thought, they're both just thoughts. But the positive thoughts tend to be more useful, I think, than the negative thoughts. And so what we try to do in Zazen is we're trying to just drop all thought. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again, that means dropping the positive thoughts as well as the negative thoughts. So you shouldn't be doing your Zazen trying to just keep the positive thoughts and drop the negative thoughts. You just let all of the thoughts go, and that is the best way to find that state that is beyond thought, is to just let all of the thoughts go. But on the other hand, wallowing in the negative is useless. Wallowing in the positive tends to be a little bit more useful. So my sense is, when I am getting the darker, more negative thoughts, is to go, okay, I recognize those as thoughts that come from my imagination. They don't really have any power, and I'm going to let them go. When the positive thoughts come, I try not to get too excited about them, but I let them go too. But the more I let go of the negative thoughts, what you're left with, which is interesting, is something that seems altogether, that's not the word I want. At its base, it seems positive. This is what I think they call bliss. Bliss is this interesting thing, a phrase that comes up in a lot of Eastern religious traditions, and people imagine it as total positivity, total happiness. But Nisargadatta Maharaj said something in a passage I was reading just recently where he said bliss also includes pain. But you see the pain as part of the bliss. You see your. But Nishijima Roshi used to say, every time I wake up, even though I feel some pain, I am happy to be alive. So there you go. Be positive. I guess that's what I want to say. I don't really want to say that because I sound like a noodlehead saying that, but I think positivity and optimism are very useful, and I've found them useful in my life. And as a confirmed pessimist for probably the majority of my early life, I have found that the switchover has been also very useful. So I wanted to kind of put that out there, and that's my message for today. All right. If you want to donate to me, you can go to the URL that you were about to see on the screen below, or you're about to hear if you're listening to the audio version of this, and that is hardcorezen.info/donate. I'm doing this with my left hand, I don't know why. hardcorezen.info/donate. That's where you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are basically my only ways of making a living, especially right now, and I could use your support because I am losing out on the income I would have earned going to Europe next month, which is a big part of my annual income. But you don't got to support me if you don't want to. So I also leave you with that. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Be positive. Bye.
How you doing, Ziggy? You managing with this heat? It's still hot out here, but we're supposed to get a break pretty soon from the heat, so that'll be nice. I had to take him out for his walk really early in the morning so that we could have a little walk before it got too hot. All right, Ziggy, we'll see you later. Bye.